Buster Blader is, of course, an absolute icon of this channel, to the point where his swords are what makes up our channel's icon, our coat of arms, if you will, and his likeness and image is what has made this channel what it is. Especially towards the beginning of the channel, our Buster Blader videos were always what generated the most support, and I really do appreciate that. People have been asking me in comments, why haven't I made an updated Buster Blader video with the release of Bystials? Why haven't I been looking at this? And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, it's because Bystials hurt this deck so much more than they help it. If everything goes according to plan with this deck, absolutely, you can put Bystials down, no problem. You can stop that. You can stop the likes of Branded very easily. Absolutely. But it has never been harder to resolve the combos in this deck than what it is right now, especially if you're aiming to use some of the new support. Now, we're playing a Bystial Buster Blader deck today. We're not playing Branded because, trust me, I tried Branded Buster Blader and it just devolves into Branded at some point. Again, the Branded cards are so powerful and oppressive at this point that it's difficult to use them as an engine because you're constantly wanting to put more of them in. They're just that good, right? So we're not going down the route of Branded because it made the deck really clunky. It just didn't work right. Today we're playing Bystials. We have had to make some changes to the core of the strategy. We're no longer playing the Destruction Swordmaster. We're playing the OG Buster Blader, and there's a very specific reason why. That reason being the Destruction Swordsman Fusion, which is a card we were not in the past playing. If you want to have any sort of decent chance of summoning out your Buster Blader fusions, I feel like this card is going to be infinitely more valuable now than it was in the past. Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman is what normally sets the combo off by sending the necessary materials to the graveyard for fusion summoning, but the fact that those materials are now so easily banished makes it very difficult for the secondary effect of this to resolve. However, it will still bring out the Buster Dragon, so in a pinch, this will bring out the Buster Dragon regardless of graveyard disruption, and then hopefully you can go into the fusion monster off of something like your Destruction Swordsman Fusion. Is it consistent? No. I'm here to show off some of the replays that we've got in testing. I don't think this is a finished product, nor do I think that this deck is really going to see any level of competitive success in the near future. But again, we are trying. I wanted to give people an update in terms of what exactly it is we're doing with the deck, just so that y'all aren't sitting thinking that we're not doing it, that we're not coming back to it, right? The reason we haven't been doing updates is because it sucks. It sucks worse than it ever has been. It really does, and that's very unfortunate and hard for me to say, but it's just true. It's just true. We're going to give it a go anyways. We got a few replays lined up, deck profile at the end, so if you're interested in this style of content, absolutely subscribe to catch this and anything else that we do. Like the video. Let's get into game one. What I want to demonstrate first is the absurdity of going up against some of these really relevant strategies at the moment, especially while going second. So our opponent's going to lead off here with Keldo, dropping the Kel back to mill 5 from both players' deck, triggering off Scream, triggering Sulik, triggering Heartbeat? Heartbeat, yeah. So they're going to recycle a bunch of resources back, grabbing back their Sulik. Sulik then is going to search their deck for a monster, grabbing Rhino Heart. There it is. They've not used their normal summon yet, and just like that, they've added 3 cards to their hand. So they're going to normal summon the Rhino Heart, pitching Merly. Merly activates, shuffle back to fusion summon into Kit Kalos here. Unfortunately, we don't have any hand traps. Kit Kalos then grabbing the Scream from the deck. Of course, we all know how crazy Tearlament can go. They're going to send their Kit Kalos, activating a whole bunch of cards, milling 1, milling 3, milling 5. Agito milling an additional 5 from both players' deck. Going into Rilkalos here. Rilkalos, of course, having a negate for a special summon, which inherently just beats this deck, right? They can negate your prologue, which automatically sort of forces you to lose. They're going to go into Elf as well. Magnemut banishing, of course, our dragon from the graveyard. We're going to go for memories. They're going to activate Rilkalos to negate the memories. They're going to now go into Beatrice. Beatrice then milling any card they want, dropping the Garura to draw 1. They're going to Snow to banish 7, summon itself back to the field. Now they've got the Exceed material needed for a Dweller. This is the kind of thing that you're competing against. Cartesia and Branded and High Spirits, of course, back to hand. This is the kind of stuff that you are competing against. They've got a 5-card hand, and they've got a full field. what have we got? We've got normal summon Whelp is what we've got. We're going to go Saronir. We're going to banish something from their graveyard. What did we target? We targeted Snow, but it doesn't matter because he's going to use Keldo to stop us anyways. So Saronir doesn't actually even do anything here, unfortunately. And Dweller, of course, negating the activation of any effects in the graveyard for this turn. We're going to go Regained. Normal summoning our Whelp. That's going to trigger their Scream to mill 3 cards from their deck. That's fine. They don't even care about our Search. We're going to grab the Fusion spell because we've already got everything else. We might as well. They're going to mill 5 additional cards from top of both players' decks, going into Dragus Depelia. That's going to trigger our Regain to summon the Bystial from the graveyard. They are going to use now their Mudora to negate and return that back as well before summoning out their Kikalos once more. Kikalos grabbing them a Rhino Heart. Now we're simply going to set free and go off into Linkuriboh and pass. Dragus Depelia, of course, preemptively negating the Linkuriboh to ensure that it is useless. And they're going to go Abyss Dweller here. We're going to sort of try to do something. Potentially, maybe. There's a bit of a long chain here. We try to go our Memories. Memories gets negated by Crane. Rilkalos negates the... Sorry, Prologue gets negated by Crane. Memories gets negated by Rilkalos. We're going to go into Trap Trick as a last-ditch effort this card because its activation was negated. We can still activate it. We're going to send the cards necessary, bringing out the Buster Dragon. But Memories can't even activate in Graveyard this turn thanks to the Abyss Dweller. They flip up their Sullick and we decide, you know what, 0% chance of competing. This is what I'm talking about. Not only do they have every possible counter or answer to how Buster Blader functions with the amount of graveyard disruption they have, they also have all of the answers on field. The fact that they have Sullick completely shuts down your strategy. It doesn't matter when, doesn't matter how. Sullick beats you. Crime negates you. Rilkalos negates you. Dragus Depelia negates you. Like, it's just... it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Which is very unfortunate, but it's crazy. We have a couple of other replays though. We're going to show off at least some of the interactions within the deck. That was a bit of a rough showing of just how bad you can get stomped, and likely will if you try to bring this into the modern ranked ladder. Alrighty, getting into game 2 here. We have the Bystial Lubellion in hand this time, which at least gives us another form of interruption here. We're going to normal summon our Whelp. Whelp activates, grabs us Prologue, and that's full combo in terms of the Buster Blader cards, right? I know a lot of Buster Blader decks like to go a lot harder than that in terms of like a turn 1 board and crazy combos and stuff, but that's not always necessary. They are, of course, able to banish the Whelp from the graveyard, unfortunately, but we still have Lubellion and Grave to serve as an interruption should that be necessary. We are going to go for Max C on the summon of the Parlor, which is hopefully going to deter them from making any further plays. They're going to send Changeover, returning Parlor, adding himself back to hand. We're going to go Prologue at this stage. That is, however, unfortunately going to trigger their Saronir, but some people simply don't know how to chain against Buster Blader. You need to wait until they activate Memories and then chain. They do manage to activate Max C here, but we have a handy enough negate on the Call by the Grave, negating their Max C. They themselves still being under Max C, of course. So we negate the Max C. We go Memories then. Memories is going to banish itself from Grave as well as the materials necessary for a fusion summon into the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, changing all of his dragons to defense, preventing them from activating their effects. Saronir, of course, fizzles. Then we bring in the Buster Dragon, just in case he tries to summon anything that isn't a dragon, will now also be negated. He's going to go for Changeover here, of course. Changeover fusing 2 to bring out Xiao. Xiao normally being an Omni Negate, but unfortunately doing nothing in the face of our Buster Blader. They're going to go Branded Fusion, sending Xiao and the Albaz. In their head, they were thinking to themselves, I'm going to summon something that isn't a dragon. This is a worm. Well, that's where the Buster Dragon comes in, because all of your monsters become dragons. So you're now swapped to defense as well, just as useless as the Xiao, and with that our opponent decides that, you know what, they've got better things to do. And that's what the strategy looks like when it works. Again, it's decent, it's cool when it works, of course. It's just not consistent enough. But there you go. That's the Buster Blader strategy for those who are relatively new here or unfamiliar with it. Let's get into game 2. 3. This is game 2. Let's get into game 3. Alrighty, game 3 here, and a lot of Bystial going on in this hand here. We're going to drop the Lubellion, grabbing ourselves the Magnamut, and unfortunately we don't have an awful lot more to do here. We're going to normal summon to go into Linkuriboh. Now we're going to banish the extra deck lock from the grave to go into the Magnomet. That does unfortunately trigger their Saronir. Their Saronir manages to summon itself before ours even gets a chance to come out. And this is another one of those sort of issues with this deck at the minute, is that they're just going to banish the ever-loving hell out of your graveyard, right? They're going to go Aliber here. We're going to use the Imperm on the Aliber. Now, in a situation like this, it's always smartest to hit the Aliber with the negate, because ultimately they're either A, going to search for Branded Fusion, which would imply that they don't have it, or B, they're going to search for Branded Lost, right? So those are your two options. So either way, you're either stopping them from getting the monster that you would have impermed anyway, or if you let this go through and they already had Branded Fusion, then you're not going to be able to imperm or activate any cards in response to their fusion summons anyway. So you're losing out on your imperm regardless. You might as well take the 50-50 on whether or not they have Branded Fusion. Luckily on this occasion we won the 50-50 and they didn't actually have it. We are going to try and summon out our Magnomet here by banishing the Linkuriboh, but he just refuses to allow us to banish our own stuff. Luckily we've got the double Bystial in hand, which means we still can get the job done, banishing Linkuriboh to summon out our Drissworm, Culp at the Grave, then Fizzling. This guy's also got a million Royal Rare cards. He's going to send Saronir. I don't know if this guy's like cheating or anything. Not all of his deck is Royal, so I don't know, maybe it is just genuine, like real. But it is what it is. Gonna activate Branded Fusion, sending Cartesia. He ended up being able to extend into the Branded Fusion anyway, thanks to the Saronir being destroyed. They're gonna go Albion, banishing for the Dusk Dragon, then milling an additional card to the graveyard, sending Lubellion, which he'll now summon by tributing the Albion. Lubellion then, of course, being able to activate its effect, activating the Branded Regain straight from the deck, implying that this card is likely... Well, no, there's Branded Beast right there. So he has his sort of setup here with a couple of interruptions. We draw into another copy of the Destruction Sword Infusion. We summon out our Magnomet, trying to get something done. We're going to activate the Magnomet's effect to essentially search our deck at the end of the turn for another Bystial, or another Dragon more specifically, just to see if we can get something done. They're going to bring out Quiritis as well as Saronir. Magnomet then, they are going to shuffle back the Albion. We're going to tribute Magnomet, if I could speak, for Lubellion. This is when they're going to flip up their beast, pop the Lubellion, and unfortunately that's pretty much GG's for us, yeah. There you go. What do you want me to do? Let's get into the deck profile. Do I think that this is the best way to play Buster Blader? Probably not. I wanted to test a version of it using some of the new cards and the new support, because that seems to be what people were after, like a Bystial Buster Blader deck, but it's just not very good, which is unfortunate, but it just isn't. You don't gain enough advantage from your graveyard. You sort of need everything in there that you can. The addition of a lot of dragons to your deck helps in terms of being able to resolve your fusion spell, but even that is inconsistent in and of itself, because you also need to have this guy in your hand, and unless you want to start running 3 copies of the biggest brick in your deck, you're not going to be seeing that in your hand very often. The deck's in a very, very weird place. It really is. It's just trying to find the balance of what makes it work versus what doesn't. Because the deck is so thick, you don't have too much room for... I mean, we do have a decent number of hand traps at least. I don't know. Okay, we'll just go through the deck profile. We'll start off with the Buster Whelp of the Destruction Swordsman. This is, of course, the main normal summon of the deck. On normal summon, you grab a Destruction Sword card from your deck and add it to your hand. You can also tribute it to summon a Buster Blader from your hand or graveyard. So we've also got the Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. If this card is face up and equipped to one of your Buster monsters as a spell card, your opponent cannot summon monsters from their extra deck, which in an ideal world is phenomenal, except it will just get popped by virtually any deck that wants to get over this card can. The only one that would cause reprieve here, the only one that this would really shut down or stop, would be Tearlament, and only if they're not playing Branded. That's pretty much it. That's the only real deck that would struggle with this particular lock, because virtually everything else has an out for it. We've got Triple Maxi. We're playing the Wizard Buster Destruction Sword. This card is a lot more prevalent in this meta, rather than most. This card prevents the activation of any card effect that activates in the graveyard which would help a lot in a lot of matchups, and it's a little bit more consistent to set up. It's still very, very difficult though, and more often than not acts as a brick, so it is what it is. You have to run these extra bricks because if you don't, you simply don't have the power you need to push through certain decks and boards. Triple Ash Blossom, we're running a Bystial package, 1 Magnuma, 2 Saronir, 1 Drissworm, 2 Baldrake. We all know what the Bystials do by this stage. And 2 copies of Buster Blitter, he's here for his name. We're playing this guy over the Destruction Swordmaster because we need the OG one in hand for the fusion spell. If you cut the fusion spell, you would replace this guy with the Destruction Swordmaster as well if you wanted to cut these. But figuring that we have so many dragons and that our graveyard is going to get disrupted, don't kid yourself into thinking that your graveyard is going to stay intact. It is going to get disrupted. Bearing that in mind, I found it more prevalent to use these. Triple Bystial Lubellion will discard itself from hand to grab you one of your Bystial cards. It can also special summon itself by tributing a level 6 or a higher Dark Dragon, and will set up one of your branded continuous cards directly for the deck, like your Beast or Regained. Speaking of Regained, if a lighter dark monster is banished, you can place one of those banished monsters back on the bottom of the respective owner's deck, and then you can draw a card. If your opponent special summons or summons a monster at all, basically, while this card is face up, you can revive a Bystial monster back from your graveyard. Pretty solid. Double Destruction Swordsman Fusion. This card is interesting. It is, of course, a fusion spell for obviously your Buster Blader. It is a quick play spell, which is very useful, and more important than that, it uses either field as materials. So you can fuse one of your opponent's dragons alongside a Buster Blader in your hand to summon out your Destruction Swordmaster, which is pretty good. Like, honestly, there's a few really good things about this card. You can also add it from your graveyard back to your hand simply by sending a card from your hand to the graveyard. Sort of tag it out. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of versatility with this. Because of that graveyard effect, you would be tempted to play this card at 1. I don't know about that. You can get away with playing this at 1 and maybe hope to mill it off of your prologue or something like that. But more often than not, your mills off of prologue are already predefined as memories and Buster Blitter. So you can cut this card down if you want. You can cut it completely if you want. It's definitely not mandatory, but given the amount of dragons and dragon hate that we were up against, it definitely seemed more useful than it ever really has been before. Double Call by the Grave and single Crossout Designator, of course, for all those pesky hand traps and the Bystials on occasion. Double Destruction Sword Memories. You can banish this card from your graveyard in order to fusion summon. It also has other text, but that text is 99% of the time meaningless. Prologue of the Destruction Swordsman. This is where the magic happens. You can send a Destruction Sword card as well as a Buster Blader monster from your deck to the graveyard to special summon a Buster Dragon directly from your extra deck. Buster Dragon, of course, being this guy here that changes all of your opponent's monsters to dragons. So it sets up one half of the combo, and by sending a Destruction Sword card from deck to grave, you're going to be sending memories, which will allow you to fusion summon when it's sent to the grave, which will then facilitate the second half of your combo. Because that's what this card is. It is a combo between these two cards. I've talked about this a ton in the past, but I haven't recently, so for anyone who's new to the channel, that's what this deck is. We got triple copies of Infinite Impermanence, then triple copies of Trap Trick to basically grab Prologue from our deck as often as we want, and Branded Beast. Tribute a Dragon monster in your field, target a card your opponent controls, and destroy it once per turn, as long as you control a Bystial monster. Pretty solid stuff. Getting into the extra deck, we've got double copies of Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, as well as double copies of Buster Dragon. This is our little 1-2 punch here. Buster Dragon changes all of your opponent's monsters to dragons, and your Dragon Destroyer Swordsman will switch all of your opponent's dragons to defense and prevent them from activating their effects, while also gaining 1000 attack and defense for each dragon your opponent controls or that's in their graveyard. Again, it's a very dragon-centric game, so even by himself, sometimes this card will win you games. Not very often, though, to be perfectly honest. Usually it's part of a combo, and that combo is very easy to disrupt in this modern version of the game. Very unfortunate, but very true. We've got the Black Rose Moonlight Dragon, just as a generic level 7, just in case you have a Bystial and your Whelp. On summon, target a level 5 or higher special summon monster your opponent controls and return it back to the extra deck. Sorry, target a special summon monster your opponent controls, return it to the extra deck, or if your opponent special summons a level 5 or higher monster, you can then target an additional monster once per turn. That was a really weird way of wording this card's effect, but basically it's a once per turn bounce, essentially. Shooting Razor Dragon is yet another generic level 7 target. This card isn't the best. I don't really like this card too much, so I would probably take this one out. It's mainly here to ensure that we have this guy engraved, to be honest, more so than anything else. But that is like, that is an ideal world, right? That is a utopian version of Buster Blader, so it is, and it's never gonna happen. Buster Dragon we've talked about. Draco Berserker of the Tinyi, generic level 8, not really anything worth mentioning, just a huge beat stick. Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, something that is worth mentioning. Prologue. Prologue does summon your Buster Dragon, but at the end of the following turn, the Buster Dragon does get destroyed. He's not sticking around forever, which means you might as well use him before you lose him. For that reason, because we play so many level 1 tuners, we put in the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss so that you can use your Buster Dragon plus a level 1 tuner to go into the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss for its Omni Negate. Just a rather consistent way of getting that set up. We've got Wallow, because we play a bunch of Bystial cards, and this card is actually pretty damn strong sometimes. So yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. Basically, you can, if your opponent obviously has cards in the graveyard, you can detach either 1 or 2 materials to do the appropriate effect. If you detach 1, you return it to deck. If you detach 2, and the target is the monster, you can special summon it to your side of the field. And if it's a spell or a trap, you also just set it to your field. So you basically just steal a card from the graveyard, or you can just shuffle it into the deck. Linkuriboh, mandatory card in this deck because you need to have a dragon in your graveyard. So ideally, you want to normal summon your Buster Whelp, search your deck for Prologue, and then you link it off for your Linkuriboh, putting a dragon in your grave. And then Prologue will put the memories and the Buster Blader, enabling your full play. Heretic Seal, because we're playing Bystials, and it's a pretty decent interruption. Can tribute a monster to shuffle, return an opponent's card back to the hand. And if this card itself is tributed, you can special summon another dragon directly from your deck, but its attack and defense becomes 0. So it's a good way of summoning either Magnomet to get an additional search, or Drissworm, so that if they do eventually deal with your 0 attack and defense monster, you get to take another monster with it. Then we've got IP Masquerena, generic generic Link Summon card for your Avramax. That's pretty much it. Buster Whelp is a card you'll very rarely use, to be honest. You can probably use it more in other versions of the deck, but in this particular version, it's not. Usually it's not necessary. Your problem isn't that you're struggling to put your cards in play, or not you're struggling to resolve your combo or get your cards. It's more so that your opponent decimates your graveyard. Like, you can get consistent access to Prologue, you can get consistent access to all of your graveyard pieces, you can put them all in there very easily with this deck. That's not the problem. The problem is that your opponent decimates your graveyard, or negates your activations, or negates your fusions, or even after you do resolve your combo, will simply uses something like an Imperm or a Sullic or anything like that to negate the effect of your monsters on the board, because they're only really countering monster cards, not spells or traps. So it's this card isn't too necessary because consistency isn't the problem. If this card's Link Summon, send a Destruction Sword card from your deck to the graveyard, then you can special summon a Buster Blader from your hand if you have one. At the end of the battle phase, if your opponent has no monsters, you can target a Buster Blader monster you control that didn't attack and inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack points. That's referring specifically to the fact that this card can't attack directly. That's it. It can attack all of your opponent's monsters. And if it attacks a defense position it can't attack all your opponent's monsters. But if it attacks a defense position monster, it inflicts piercing damage. But it can't attack directly. Man, this card would be awesome if it could attack all your opponent's monsters, huh? They really need to. We were talking about this in Discord. I'm tripping over my words a lot, and I apologize for that. We were talking about this in Discord and how this deck really needs an overhaul. It's not even like a main deck overhaul it needs. It literally just needs better boss monsters. Like, this guy was good 5 years ago. Maybe not 5, that's an exaggeration. But you know what I mean, like, it's just not enough. It's just not enough anymore. He has no protection, he has no recursion, he offers nothing in terms of advantage other than he hits dragons. So yeah, small sidetrack. We have Verte Anaconda, which is useful in this version of the deck because you can send your Destruction Swordsman Infusion to the graveyard off of its effect. Will you ever do that? Probably not. Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avramax. Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avramax is basically just here as an additional boss monster sort of beater to be summoned off of Masquerena. Again, your deck very rarely generates the amount of advantage necessary to go into a card like this, so don't worry too much about it, but it just presents an actual boss monster for your deck, which unfortunately Buster Blader simply does not meet the definition of anymore. But yeah, there you go, that's my deck, and I know it sounds like I've been shitting on it this whole video, and it's because I have been, because it's not very good. I don't want to lie to you guys, and I wish it was better, I really do. But it's just bad right now. If anyone out there has a good version of it, or at least a version that they believe to be good and they want to share, by all means, hop into the Discord, share your thoughts, share your opinions, ask your questions, or even just do it in the comments. But either way, thanks for sticking around this long if you have. Subscribe if you haven't, like the video if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.